Okay, it'd be great if we could start with, if you can give us some idea of just how important, is a rapid response when it comes to an emergency event within the water industry. I mean, clearly, emergency events suggest it is, but just if you can just explain, just how critical it is to get the rapid response.
Right. So emergency events in the water industry, again, is becoming something, that we tend to see more and more often coming up. I think some of the recent events, such as the COVID pandemic, the outbreak of cryptosporidium at Brixham, and other environmental pollution events really put the spotlight on these emergency situations. And they have a huge impact. It has impact on the water utility. It has an impact on public health. It has an impact on economy. It has an impact on the environment as well. So it has a multifaceted impact, and therefore it's very important to develop solutions, strategic solutions that can help us overcome these emergency events. Yeah. And some of the challenges I see, Phil, is that you want to have a solution for these emergency events, but by definition, an emergency event is one that's not going to happen very often. Yeah. So how do you balance off actually investing in a technology, in a product that is in a state of readiness to be deployed for an event? And while it is in that state of readiness, how do you fund it? How do you keep it going? So from my perspective, I think being ready for emergency events is very, very important because it can impact so many different aspects of the economy, public health, and the environment in general.
Okay, yeah, and you've outlined there as well. Sort of part of the problem is being ready for it, but you don't want to, if you like, have a load of resources just sitting idle for 364 days of the year, against the one day when they might be needed. So in terms of preparing for the response at and often it's a large scale required. So it's not like, you just got to get a couple of people in to sort something. It's a major event. So you need a large scale response and you need the right people when the time. So just how challenging are those sort of aspects of it?
Absolutely. So, I'll talk about one example, a recent example. So, we had the cryptosporidium outbreak at Brixham, yeah. And for that emergency event, we got it, we worked with Southwest Water, they got in touch with us, and we were on site within 36 hours of first contact, yeah. Now, ice pigging is a very specialist pipe cleaning process, and Suez as a business have invested in it and developed it for over a decade. Yeah. So cryptosporidium outbreaks don't happen very frequently, but we had been working and developing ice pigging for over a decade. What that means that we were developing kit, we were investing in innovation, we were investing in people, and people is a very important aspect of this whole deployment scheme because you can have the kit, maybe you can store it, but as you say, many times it is deployment at scale, and deployment at scale means it's not something you can pack up and put it in a garage and bring it out 10 years later. Yeah. This is large scale equipment because the response has to be at a very significant scale. So it is not only the equipment, but it's also the people, training the people, investing in the people, and then making sure they're up to speed with latest developments as well. So it was sort of, activity spread out over a decade that we were able to, harness and put into action very, very quickly when this event happened there. And to give you a bit, example on feeling for the scale of the activity. So we carried out 20 operational site visits. Across those 20 operational site visits, we carried out 98 individual ice pigging operations. We were working day and night. And in addition to that, that ended up cleaning 45,000 meters of pipeline. So that's a lot of pipeline to be cleaned within a very short span of time. Now, there could have been other technologies that we could have deployed for this solution, but they would have taken a lot longer. So again, when you're dealing with an emergency situation, you need to ensure that the impact time is as minimum as possible. Because the longer that emergency goes on, the bigger impact it has on human health, the bigger impact it has on the economy, and the bigger impact it has on the environment. So again, the essence of all of this is that these technologies need a lot of investment over a long period of time to make sure that they're ready when you need them.
Yeah, and I think based on your own experiences as a company, I think you're suggesting that various industry stakeholders need to sort of come together to create a sort of formal or a right approach to emergency event. And I think you yourselves are recommending a 4-point plan or framework, which potentially can ensure that that sort of right strategic service is in place. So perhaps you can go through those, point what you think this plan is, the required plan is, to make sure that the response is fit for purpose, shall we say?
Certainly. So as I said, it's 10 years of investment in something, and then you have an event and it's ready to go. So from our perspective, we'd like to have a more holistic approach to this, where you bring together all stakeholders. And then when I say stakeholders, it has to be the regulator of water, it has to be the water utilities as well, and it has to be industry who are developing and investing and bringing these technologies to the fore. We need to understand and map out all emergency scenarios for the industry. And with that, you need to have mitigation plans. So what are my emergency scenarios and what are the mitigation plans that we can put in place to address those emergencies? So that is step one. Step two is, of course, then selecting what technologies are available to play a part in our mitigation plan. So step two is identifying the best technologies available for that emergency scenario. Step three is actually, this is the elephant in the room here. So who invests in it, or how do you invest in it? How do you invest collaboratively in it to make sure that these technologies are in a state of readiness, ready to be deployed at scale when they're required? Yeah. So, it's like you will be investing in them, but there may not be any immediate return from it. But ultimately, if a situation arises, these are the technologies that you will have to run to get out get yourselves out of that hole as well. So that is step number three. And step number four, which is also very important, is how do you continue to grow a skill set? How do you continue to keep people interested in this area? Yeah. So investing in the people, investing in their ongoing training over a protracted period of time, as well as investing in innovation. So, you can have a technology that was invented, say, 10 years ago, but the pace of development on the digital side of things, on the sensor side of things, is so fast that 10 years is too old. Every 2 or 3 years, you're seeing some changes. So you need to be investing in the innovation or further development of these technologies as well, which is the fourth element of it. So the first one, of course, is identifying your emergencies and your mitigation plans. The second one is what technologies will be used to address those emergencies. Step three is how do we invest in them collaboratively to make sure they're in a state of readiness. And step four is how do we invest in the future of those technologies and the people that are necessary to deliver these technologies as well.
And in case, sorry, in the case of this approach, are you having success? I mean, how are you trying to get this message promoted? Are you engaging with the various stakeholders you referenced earlier, or are you finding it slightly challenging, shall we say, to get what you would hope to be the correct response? Just where are you with this approach, I suppose?
Right. So this is the wish, Phil. This is the wish. Yeah. Where we are at this point in time, we're trying to open up the debate about this. Yeah. Because again, it's the elephant in the room. You have to talk about these scenarios. You have to talk about emergency events, and you have to say, well, okay, who's going to develop the technology and how do you invest in it? Do you go down the route of bonds, resilience bonds? Do we have some innovation funds specifically, earmarked for investment in such technologies for emergency responses? So that we at that point we're trying to build debate around it and build discussion around it so we can get to a consensus point.
Okay, but I think it's fair to say that sort of outsourcing, so involving third parties, the water companies, that seems to be part of the right way to develop emergency response. And if it's true for that, then I think it's also you've been proving that, or suggesting that when it comes to water sampling services, so a slight pivot, but outsourcing, I guess, is the common thing. You think it's also true that when it comes to water sampling services, that companies like yourselves, third parties, have a significant role to play.
Absolutely, Phil. Absolutely. So, taking a step back, I'll go back to the days of COVID. Yeah. So when COVID came along, we had to rapidly engage in wastewater sampling because we knew wastewater is a fantastic resource of information, and it could be used to identify pathogens in a population very quickly. Yeah. So you take a sample of wastewater, you do some analysis, and you can identify a pathogen. And at that point in time, we were specifically looking for COVID. So to be able to proactively provide monitoring and surveillance across certain populations of people to see whether they're going to be hit by a COVID pandemic or outbreak or not. Yeah. So we very quickly moved to develop technologies and sampling methods, specialist sampling methods and tools and analysis tools to develop a proactive health monitoring or health surveillance system. Yeah, and this was deployed across prison sites, across mass quarantine facilities at airports, etc. But when COVID went away, even though that infrastructure had been developed, that skill set had been developed, we stopped testing for pathogens through wastewater, or we're not doing enough of it. Yeah. So again, my concern is that when COVID came along, yes, we developed a skill set. Yes, we developed a capability for specialist wastewater sampling and analysis. But once COVID has gone away, there's been no concerted effort to expand that capability to other pathogens like norovirus, or other disease conditions. Polio is one example, but we really need to expand it out to all towns and cities if we can. Yeah. So I feel that we're missing a trick over there, where an emergency has actually been the trigger to develop a capability, but then we're not fully harnessing or utilizing that capability going forward. Now, moving on to outsourcing. So when it comes to sampling, sampling for me, I look at it as a logistics operation. Yeah. So when you look at very large manufacturers, any large manufacturer, you'll notice that they don't necessarily get involved in the logistics of that operation. They'll make a product and the distribution, etc., is passed on to other logistics businesses who take the product and deliver it to the market, etc. And again, from a procurement perspective, you rely on a logistics partner who collects your material, your raw material from a supplier and then delivers it to your factory where you manufacture stuff. Now, in case of the wastewater industry, many of the utilities tend to use their own sampling teams. Yeah. Whereas Suez provides this as a service, as a specialized service to some utilities. And the advantage we see in outsourcing services is that it enables the water utilities to focus on their core deliverables. AMP8 is around the corner, and we know that the challenge for AMP8 is large. So the water utilities really need to focus on things such as affordability. They need to focus on things as customer experience, and they need to focus on things such as environmental sustainability. For me, those are the three main drivers for AMP8. And those drivers then give rise to other sub-goals or objectives to deliver the headline objectives. And these are carbon net zero, emerging contaminants, PFAS, it is water leakage, it is aging infrastructure. So our objective is to help the water utilities focus more on their core deliverables and then leave the logistics operations around sampling, etc., to specialized providers like Suez, for example. Yeah. As I said, if outsourcing was not the way to go, every manufacturer would have their own logistics teams picking up their raw materials and delivering their products. But it is well established that if you're a manufacturer, you need to focus on your core objectives and your core deliverables. And the message we're trying to get out to the market is that it's worth considering outsourcing of sampling operations to a specialist sampling provider.
I'm just wondering, so I mean, you very well explained the way in which that releases the water companies to focus on their, shall we say, their core activities. But in terms of the benefits themselves, I mean, I'm wondering, are they potentially going to save some costs along the way? And also maybe, although they might be reluctant to admit it, access sort of expertise that they potentially don't have within the organization, because we know that the water companies have, shall we say, downsized at various stages, their internal staffing levels. So whether it is you're giving them access, say, to some expertise that they perhaps don't have within the organization as well, or at least at the scale required.
So again, a very good question, Phil. And when we talk about sampling, I talk to many people and say, well, what do you think sampling is? Do you think it's just about going to a site, picking a empty bottle, filling it up with a sample of water and delivering it? It's not just that. When we look at sampling, there are at least 30 operational pillars for every sampling job. Yeah. And it starts from, everything from training of your people. Are they trained to collect that particular type of sample? Route planning to make sure that, the routes that our vans are taking are optimized for carbon emissions. making sure the samples are held at a particular temperature. So, for some samples, you need to make sure that they're transported in temperature controlled conditions. Yeah. So when you're looking at temperature controlled conditions, we have refrigerators already installed within our sampling vans. So we calibrate them. So it's not only just making sure that that refrigerator is working, it's making sure that it is calibrated, and then also making sure that the thermometer using to calibrate the refrigerator is also calibrated. So there's a whole host of checks and balances, that go into a sampling operation. Has risk assessment been carried out on those sites? What are the method statements associated? So if I was to summarize all of that, a sampling operation, you're looking at there are three ingredients to any sampling operation. One is people, the sampling staff. The other one is vehicles, a fleet, yeah. And the third thing is sampling equipment, yeah. And across these, you need to bring together a host of quality assurance mechanisms that make sure that you have the right people going to the sites. They are properly trained for that type of sampling. And again, training is becoming more and more important when it comes to sampling operations, because sampling for different chemicals and different scenarios is very different. Yeah, there's a difference in there. For example, PFAS sampling. So PFAS sampling, fluorinated chemical sampling, is an emerging contaminant, and we need to sample for this across rivers, across lakes, in borehole water, etc. But your sampler cannot use any glove for this activity. They have to use specialized gloves which are PFAS free. Yeah. They can't use every sunscreen if they're sampling for PFAS. So even down to the detail of what sunscreen they're going to use on the day can have a huge impact in ensuring a quality sampling operation. Yeah. So from our perspective, a company like Suez, because that they are specialized to provide those sampling services, we go to great lengths to ensure that all these elements, from people to logistics to fleet maintenance to fleet management to equipment maintenance, equipment management, are set in motion. Yeah. So it is a big operation. It's a very large operation. Yeah. And as I say, if the water utilities are running their own sampling operations, they're having to hire samplers. If they hire people, they'll have to hire managers to manage those people. They'll have to have training programs. They'll have to look at their health and safety factors. They'll have to procure vans. They'll have to look at, fleet maintenance. They'll have to look at equipment maintenance and equipment procurement. So by outsourcing all of that activity, essentially you're pushing the burden onto someone else who's designed and to do that day in and day out. The other advantage is in sampling operations that suppose you're trying to do a capital upgrade work at a particular site. So you'll need to go and collect samples to develop some baseline understanding of the parameters of that site. And then there'll be a period where you'll have your civil works or mechanical works taking place where you'll not need sampling. And then at the end of that work, again, you have to go and take samples to validate the performance improvements as a consequence of that capital works. Yeah. Now, you don't want to hold on to sampling staff throughout that period. Yeah. So you can, again, by outsourcing it to us, we can provide the samplers when you need them, where you need them. So again, it takes the complexity out of running an internal sampling operation. And then the other thing you asked me about was cost. Is, we do case studies. In one particular case study for the UK utility, we were able to show a 30 to 40% reduction in their cost simply by outsourcing that activity to us. Yeah, and this comes down to the fact that we are doing it at scale. We are always looking to optimize routes. We have contingency plan after contingency plan, whether it be for equipment, whether it be for vehicles, whether it be for people. Yeah. We are constantly looking to upgrade sampling equipment. We are in sync with the latest technologies that are coming around for sampling. We are in sync with the latest regulations. And again, it comes down to understanding the regulations, then training up your staff. So all of that can be passed on to a third-party provider. Yeah. And I think one of the big ones for the water utilities is the moment you don't manage a large fleet, your scope 1 emissions come down. So it's a big step towards carbon net zero. If you're not, maintaining a fleet of 100 vans, immediately your scope 1 emissions come down, and let someone else manage that. Of course, it will be captured in scope 2 and scope 3. But from our perspective, we're looking at, greener vans, we're looking at hybrid vehicles, we're looking at electric vehicles. So then let us manage or take care of the concern around emissions as well.
Okay, and I'm just wondering, I mean, for water companies who get the message around outsourcing and want to investigate further, is it obvious when they're evaluating their options, who is best placed to write? I mean, you've given a lot of great detail as to the types of things that you can offer over and above maybe what the water companies themselves can do. But when it comes to comparing and contrasting services, are there some obvious questions to ask or things to look for when they're evaluating a potential supplier so that they make the right choice?
Very important again, Fed. Very, very important aspect. So, there's a spectrum of providers in this space as well. Yeah. My advice would be that when you do want to step out and when you want to start outsourcing your sampling activities, uh, work carefully through a list of parameters or KPIs. Yeah. Start off by having service level agreements with your provider. Start off by understanding their reputation in the market. Understand what quality standards do they operate to. For example, for Suez, we operate to 9001, 14001, 45001. We are also going to deploy 17025 for quality assurance of our sampling operations. So look at their quality manuals, look at their quality procedures. Also try and understand, what are their sustainability goals? Are they aligned with your ambitions as a water utility? So, for example, when we go to market, we work with customers, like-minded customers. We say that, for every £1 they spend with us, we generate more than £2 of social value. So we create a lot of social value for the UK. We are also heavily committed to green energy. Every year, Suez as a business generates 3.2 terawatt hours of energy through our anaerobic digestion plants as well as our energy from waste plants. So sustainability and making sure that your partner has the same objectives and ambitions from a global sustainability and social value creation perspective, I think is important. Making sure that they adhere to the quality protocols, have a robust quality management system behind their operation is very important as well.
Okay, so maybe if the sort of finishing message, I guess, would be around the water companies potentially need to have a rethink as to what, it is best for them to look at, what are the core activities that they perhaps don't think they can release to, third parties, and what they can trust others to do. And I'm in chatting to you, the suggestion would be, I suspect that most of them will find that they can, trust folks such as yourself with things that they're currently doing themselves, and therefore they will benefit from many of the things that you've outlined, whether it's purely cost savings, but sustainability and many more efficiencies. So just I suppose your thoughts as to the potential, because I guess you must have looked at all the water companies and what they're up to, and kind of got some idea as to the potential. So do you think is it a good opportunity, or is it a very huge opportunity? You think that most of them can potentially offload, outsource many, or at least a significant amount of their activities?
So from my perspective, I think the big focus has to be AMP8. And within AMP8, they need to focus on the real objectives that they have to deliver, yeah, which Ofport will be pushing them for. And that's going to be affordability. That's going to be infrastructure upgrades. Infrastructure upgrades is a huge challenge for the UK. We have an aging infrastructure, and that is creaking. So water utilities have to address that. They have to find cost savings as well. They have to also address carbon net zero. We are working towards carbon net zero, and there are many, many facets to achieving that objective. So for me, I think it's important that they focus on their core objectives for delivery of AMP8, and they should also try and learn from what's happening in other industries around the world. As I said, logistics operations best left to the people who manage those operations and focus on the core deliverables of the company.
Okay, I mean, it's been great to chat, and some brilliant insights into ways in which the water companies perhaps need to rethink their activities, which is great because I'm sure we all know they are, shall we say, characterized as being quite traditional in their thinking. So it's good to have some food for thought and suggestions as to how they might do things differently. So, Michael, really appreciate your time. Thank you very
Thank
much.
you very much, Phil. Much appreciated.
Thanks again.
Cheers.